الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. My name is Sophia, I'm your host. The aim of Let the Quran Speak is to help you gain deeper insights into Muslims and Islam as it is practiced here and in other parts of the world. In this episode, we'll be exploring 3 different stories. First, anger management. Have you ever shouted at someone out of anger? Have you ever done or said something in a burst of emotion that you later regretted? How does God view anger? Are there circumstances in which anger is justified? What makes anger so dangerous and destructive? And how do we avoid succumbing to it? Should we prevent ourselves from getting angry? Should we learn how to exercise restraint when we become angry? We'll be looking at that soon. Next, environmentalism. We live in a time in which people talk a lot about the environmental crisis, but they do little to change things, and Muslims are no exception. The attitude and values that shape people's perspectives on nature stem from their religious and ethical worldviews. How does contemporary Islam respond to the environmental crisis? There are some who believe that materialism and secularization has led to the current state of the environment. Others say the opposite. They suggest that the emphasis on the transcendence of God and the dominance of human beings above all creation has led to environmental degradation. How is nature viewed in Islam? And does Islam offer any guidance in the way of preserving the environment? We'll round out the show by answering questions we receive from you, our viewers. So do send us your questions at www.quranspeaks.com. Okay, Brother Shabir. So let's deal with anger management first. A lot of people go to counseling for anger management, or they're sent to counseling. They have difficulty dealing with their anger. Is anger ever justified?
Yes, I mean there are some things which obviously strike us so deeply at the core that naturally raises our ire and a bit, maybe even a lot. Sometimes we can feel that things are not going right. Other people have done injustice to us. Injustice is particularly anger-provoking because we might endure other hardships and difficulties, but we cannot understand why somebody would be unjust to us. So there are situations in which it is justifiable to feel some anger, but in most situations people become angry without justifiable cause.
I guess anger is an emotion, right? But the question is, how does one react or respond to that anger? How does one deal with that anger? Does one show it in a negative manner? Or express it in a negative manner?
Well, the Quran teaches us to control our anger. In Surah 4, there is a description of believers, and one of the descriptions, وَالْقَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, those who control their anger and forgive people. So forgiveness is one of the ways of controlling the anger. You see that somebody has done some injustice to you, you feel angry towards them, but if you forgive them, then that's a way of letting go of that situation. Maybe there's some things that you cannot forgive, so that requires a different sort of treatment. But if it is something that could be forgiven, then we are encouraged by the Quran to do so. And a lot of things can be forgiven.
So what are things that can't be forgiven then? So, some people say, if someone insults your religion or your honor, those things cannot be forgiven.
Even that can be forgiven. If somebody has taken your property, real physical property, well then you might say, okay, I don't want to forgive until the person returns the property, and you would be justified in doing so. That would be your right. But that doesn't mean to say that you should be angry over it. You can just say, as a matter of principle, that I don't want to encourage people to take property and not return it. So as a matter of principle, I demand that he returns my property, and I will forgive him. But I'm not angry about it. I'm just insisting on as a matter of principle. A lot of things need to be understood, and that will overcome anger. If we see somebody doing something wrong, our immediate reaction is, how dare he does that? But if we try to understand this person from the perspective of his or her psychology, we say, okay, this person has a reason for doing that. It's not my reason. I don't think it's a good reason, but it can be understood that this person feels justified doing that. I still think he's wrong, but I can understand why he would feel that way, because a lot of the anger comes from not understanding, like, how dare he, how could he do that? But if we know how he does that, if we know why he does that, then that is a way of overcoming the anger.
Let's take a step back and maybe go back to the Quran and the Prophet's example. Is there anything in the Quran, I mean, you mentioned one verse, is there anything else that talks about anger, or is there anything from the Hadith or the example of the Prophet Muhammad?
Yes, there is much. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was once approached by one of his companions asking for advice, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "La taghdab, do not be angry." And the person asked again and again for more advice, thinking that he'll get maybe something more prosaic, more philosophical or something like this, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, just kept saying to him, "La taghdab, do not be angry." So this perhaps was what that particular individual needed more than any other piece of advice, and that's what the Prophet
maybe he
gave
was particularly angry.
It could be. More so, the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us how to overcome anger by saying that if you are angry, then make wudu. That is the ablution that Muslims normally make before prayer, because that will somewhat cool you down. You have this heat building up inside of you. But it is more spiritual.
I think he said anger comes from Satan, so that can be cooled with the fire, with the water.
Yeah, of course, I was going to say that it's a spiritual sort of cooling here. It's not just simply the washing and cooling the body. Of course, it does that too. But when a person is feeling anger, that is, as you said, the instigation from the devil to get us to do things out of anger that we'll regret later on. But by making the ablution that a Muslim makes before offering the prayers, a Muslim then is cleansing himself or herself spiritually, washing away all of this anger and all kinds of evil desires and inclinations, all kinds of sins. So the Muslim then is purifying himself or herself and getting ready to do good deeds rather than the evils that would be by the instigation of the devil, and that could accompany such anger. So making wudu is a very useful prescription to overcome anger. The Prophet, peace be upon him, noted also to have said that if you're standing up and you're angry, then sit down. And if you're sitting down and still angry, then lie down. So by taking a more passive stance, you are in fact putting yourself in such a situation that it'll be difficult to act on the anger. So you'll do less by taking a more lenient sort of posture.
I think someone was referring to this and said, well, if you put your cheek to the ground, then all of the pride that you felt and the arrogance that leads to anger is sort of goes away. Similar to the idea of lying down.
That could be one prescription to help a person to overcome the anger. Of course, few people would want to go to that extent. One prescription is to take time out from the situation.
Change your environment,
change your environment, move away from the scene. If you're having an argument with somebody that you care about, you can say, well, wait a minute, we do care about each other, and we're having this argument. It looks like things are not going the right way. Maybe we didn't start in the right manner. Let's take some time out, think about it, and let's discuss it tomorrow. How is that? If there's an agreement, we discuss it tomorrow, then that's great. So we discuss it tomorrow. In the meantime, we can think well, plan what we're going to say and how we're going to say it, and make sure that we do it the right way the next time around, and we end up reaching the objectives. Because usually arguments stem from two persons trying to reach some objective, and it looks like maybe they're out of sync here. And if we think about it a little bit, we may find a way to reach a mutually beneficial type of decision without the anger that is involved.
Much of what we've talked about is what to do in the heat of the moment when one is already angry. What about before one becomes angry? How does one prevent oneself from becoming angry in the first place?
Yes, and there is a very simple formula that Muslims often recite, which says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim." I seek refuge in God from Satan the accursed. A Muslim should recite this in situations where it seems like one might be prone to anger. The Quran speaks about the devil inspiring people to do evil things and provoking them to things like anger and trying to cause dissent between people by things like drinking alcohol and gambling and so on. So we should recognize that this is the direction from which it is coming and avoid it by asking God for his protection from the accursed Satan.
Mm-hmm. Should we also try to purify our heart and you know, some of our attitudes, for example, being more generous towards people, more forgiving perhaps, being more humble?
Yes, being humble and forgiving are qualities of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And the Quran often describes the Prophet as being forgiving towards people. He had to do this more than anyone else because from his position as a Prophet of God, knowing the secrets that God is revealing to him, looking at the status and the actions of his people, he must see them doing a lot of wrong. But from his perspective, he has to be forgiving, lenient, tolerant, and if he could do that, well, then we are his followers. We should be able to do the same thing.
So how did he, are there any circumstances in his life where he became angry and it was reported that he was angry? How did he respond to those circumstances?
It is mentioned actually that he never used to get angry for personal issues, but he would in fact be perturbed if people were doing things contrary to the religion of God. He took those things seriously. It is also mentioned that when he delivered the sermon on a Friday, he would appear to be quite immersed in the sermon to the extent that some anger would be seen in the way that he's delivering the speech. That could have been on some occasions. It's hard to think that this was his normal and regular procedure. It could be that maybe on some occasions people were insisting on doing some things contrary to his instructions, and so he did not talk to them directly. It is mentioned that often he did not criticize people directly, but he would save his criticisms for when he stood on the pulpit. So when he addressed the gathering at large, that is when he would insist on the point, so that a specific individual doesn't feel threatened by what he has to say, but they can take the message in an indirect manner.
We've talked a lot about how one should not get angry. What are the reasons why? What is so problematic about anger?
Well, often anger, I think you said it earlier, a person may do something in anger and then regret later on, because the anger somehow causes a person to lose one's balance of thought, and one does not apply his actions or her actions in a judicious manner. One goes to excesses and extremes. And it is only later, when the anger cools down, that one looks back at what one has done and thinks, okay, wait a minute, I shouldn't have done that. So there is this regret. Well, to prevent that sort of regret, control your anger before it controls you. I think that's a very simple formula.
So what would you suggest to someone dealing with, having trouble with their anger? Would you suggest that they seek counseling, read books? What would you suggest?
Yes, all of these. I think we should all take stock of ourselves. We should ask ourselves, okay, on a scale of, let's say, 0 to 5. 0 is nothing there. 5, there's a lot. Okay, so on a scale of 0 to 5, how do I feel angry often? Is it 0 or is it 5? If it's, you know, I get irritated by little things, is that a description of me? If yes, 5. If no, 0. So if we're getting a lot of 5s, or close to 5, then really we should seek help, reading some self-help books, seeking counseling, and so on.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we look at Islam